Hi, welcome back to Mind Matters. Mind Matters is a show where we are investigating the explosive innovation and the real creativity that's going on in the 21st century. I am very pleased to have a toy innovator with us today, as well as other products that they're responsible for. This is Corey Fate. Fate, welcome.
Thank you.
Glad you're here. Tell me a little bit about your firm, because I really want to play with some of this stuff, but I'm going to restrain myself for a moment or two until we learn a little bit more about what you do.
Sure. ObjexDesign is what would be considered a typical industrial design company. A lot of people don't know what industrial design is, but it's probably most similar to an architecture firm for products.
Okay.
And we meet with companies, CEOs, all the way down to the manufacturing floor. And we take that idea and we bring it all the way through the process.
So somebody has an idea for a product,
right?
And they come to you, and you, as you said, act as an architect. You assist them through every step of the process?
Yeah, we're capable of assisting them all the way through. Some industrial design firms don't manage it all the way through. We do. So we try and take the objectives of the business owner all the way down through to the factory floor to keep the design intent through the whole process.
So they dream up this thing, and then
sometimes they dream it up, sometimes we dream it up. It depends. It's a collaborative process.
Okay, very cool. And so before we get really involved with the products and the whole process, tell me a little bit about how you got involved and how you made this company real.
Well, I went to school at KU and graduated in industrial design, which is an actual degree. Came out and went to work for a firm here in the local area that was just up and coming. They started off as a rapid prototyping company, and then started adding engineering to help facilitate the rapid prototyping, and then brought me on a contract basis,
okay,
which evolved into a job. Over some time there, I was out constantly observing, and just decided about 6 years into it that I could probably undertake this myself. So I did.
And when you established the firm, what was your vision for it? What do you want this to be when you grow up?
Great question. This firm values integrity, and that's based off of my personality and on the personalities of everybody who we hired. And so as the future forward goes with the company, the objective is to create great products that last a very long time. I'm kind of a little tired of the throwaway society. Mm-hmm. I'd rather things be more durable. I'd rather things be tuned to actual users, and they need to also be tuned to the business putting them out.
And market space, you're regional, national, global?
We're technically global. I mean, today global is fairly easy with online videos and so on and so forth. It's fairly easy to not be geographically tied. It's always nice to meet somebody in person and do things in person, and that can be accomplished if necessary. But generally speaking, with online video, you can show and spin, and I can send files and so on and so forth. So it's pretty seamless to stay global without actually having to do the travel.
So walk me through the process. Someone has a business need, not necessarily an idea for a product.
Correct.
Right?
Very correct.
And so they bring you a business need, and then what happens?
So just to compound on that point, many companies that may come to us may say, we want the next toaster or the widget, whatever it is.
Okay.
And I use toaster, I believe I'm quoting somebody, but they asked the question, we want the next toaster. And I said, do you want the next toaster, or do you want to make toast? Which way?
That's an interesting question.
So You're making the presumption that it's a toaster.
Yeah.
So that would be the highest level kind of conversation we would have. However, most of the companies are fairly well established. They know their market, and they know what their competition is doing and where they need to start moving their company and why. We'll probe them and find out what are their reasonings behind creating the next thing.
So they may have market research, or they may just have a an idea that there's a market pain out there that they're trying to attend to.
Correct. Yeah. Either their competition is doing this, or they are trying to vertically integrate some.
Lots of things.
Yeah, some business motivation.
Okay.
So we'll take that and we start a research process where we are coming to understand the competition, where it sits, why it sits there, pros and cons, and then try and also understand what the users are actually asking for. So many times you'll run into a product that's established for many, many years as a certain way, but nobody's really in love with it. If they had the alternative, they would take it, but they're suffering with what's available.
So in addition to basically being a premier design shop, you're a marketing company. You are
some versions of that.
Yeah.
We have to plug in. We have to be so conscious of what's going on in the marketing side, of what culture is needing, or culture is wanting. So we, bounce between being a cultural provider. Culture is already heading this direction, and we're feeding it, and a trendsetter in that you didn't know. This kind of backs into some of the research things. We're not big fans of research groups or focus groups and things like that that have gone on in the past. That used to be kind of all the rage for a while.
right.
People, their general essence, are not very good at being predictive about what they would want. They're very good at being critical of what they don't like, which is good information. But if you present something with what would you like instead, it's very hard, even ourselves, to predict that. It's much easier to have the thing in your hand and say, I like
What do you
this
like
about
about
it,
it?
or I don't like that about it.
Gotcha.
So it's much harder to use focus groups to genesis an idea than it is to vet an idea after it's been
Once it's
genesis.
established. So as far as product development is concerned, that's where some of the real power of additive manufacturing, or 3D printing as it's known, comes to bear.
It does. As we were just talking about, we can have a concept, we can bring that through CAD, and we can fake some things along the way. It's not manufacturing ready or any of those types of things, but we can build it on a 3D printing machine and get it into somebody's hands. You can very quickly vet something out. Even if it is along the lines of trying to figure out, is the thing in CAD, which I can blow up on my screen to be, gigantic, and I can see a gap that's this big, it looks like it's a chasm, but in reality that's a hair. And so there's certain things you can do with CAD, and there's certain things you can't. It's not almighty. And so many times you need to print something out to see. So if, for example, if I have two things that are assembled together, and I put them in assembly, and I know how the screw's going to go in and all that kind of stuff, and I print it out, and I go and try and put it together, and I realize the screwdriver won't fit through this area in order for me to get the screw actually screwed down. Well, those things can happen because CAD can't say, yeah, you're going to be able to put a hand in there and do that.
Gotcha.
So it's great for just quick iteration. You print one off, you see the problems with it, you make the adjustments, you print another one off. So we also do sketch models, but it's becoming so quick and so useful that they're becoming our sketch models as well.
So out of curiosity, where do you see the role of augmented reality or things like Oculus Rift, where you're actually modeling three-dimensional objects in front of your face? Are you poking around in any of that stuff right now, or do you see it on the horizon?
We are with a particular product. We are looking at that, and it's how there's two ways I see that that's going to start to affect. Number one is how do I make a purchase? So for instance, you can get a 3D body scan for not a tremendous amount of money, and if I have your clothes, we'll say for example, in a database, I can in theory put the clothes on you. And so now I don't need to step in front of a mirror, I don't need to see, I don't need to go to the store. I can actually do that all online with my avatar that is me, and spin myself around and see how the clothes fit.
Right.
So you select a medium and you put it on you and you see how tight it fits. So that type of thing. So, or likewise, any other widget in the store, I can experience it online, especially if you get into 3D glasses and a whole bunch of other things, virtual reality type. I can experience without, moving. The second side of that is customization. So I want my thing my way. So the ability to, I believe there's a couple cell phone companies and cell phone case companies that are starting this, where it's you design the case online with their tools that they give you, and they ship you the final thing.
Manufacture on demand.
Right, on demand. So there's less waste, which is great on that, and it's exactly what you wanted for you. So you can individualize.
What's interesting to me, and we've talked about this on previous edifications of this show, is that we seem to be returning to the late 1700s, early 1800s, where there was personalized products. So for instance, the story I like to tell is if you ever needed a suit, You wouldn't go to a major mall and put on ill-fitting jackets until one closely fit you. There would be somebody called a tailor who would actually manufacture a suit to fit you personally. It seems that we are tracking back to those origins of marketing in which products actually fit people, they're actually comfortable, shoes that are comfortable, cars that meet your particular personal demand. The business that you're in is a business that didn't even exist 20 years ago, right? In this form that it is today. Not by a long shot.
Raymond Loewy and some other early, they were all through the 40s and 50s where it started to have an evolution. There was always, obviously, somebody designing, but typically that would be an inventor. Then it started to move into an engineer classically, but some others started to pave the road into these products need to fit more people and we need to understand people rather than this is my idea and if you buy it, great. But so it started to gain that understanding where you needed that person that understood everything from the marketing side, what was going on the manufacturing side, and how to marry the two through a concept.
Well, so once again, back to your analogy of being the architect of the system.
Right.
You know it from cradle to grave, to use an ill-worn term, but what you're really concerned about is how do you negotiate through every incremental step of that process.
Yeah, I mean, it's information overload. It's a fire hose of information, and the more skill you have, the better you can dial that back into creating the product instead of any one of these products, which may or may not fit the bill.
We're coming up to a break here pretty quick, but one of the questions that I've got is, who is your typical customer? Is there such a thing?
No, we reach all the way down to 1, 10, $500 million in sales from that standpoint. We touch base with inventors themselves, and then we have our own products that we generate.
And you're primarily consumer-facing products, or are you also doing B2B industrial stuff?
Yes, we also do B2B as well. We have the whole gamut. We're experts at becoming experts in the next thing
That's
that
pretty
you're
cool. We're going to take a quick break. We've got toys. So as soon as we get an opportunity, we're going to start playing around. But I want to learn a lot more about how you take an idea from here and put it in your hand. See you in a minute.
Did you know kids who play outdoors have healthier lungs?
Totally.
Did you know that boys that play with dolls make better husbands?
My son has lots of dolls.
But did you know terry cloth diapers breathe better?
I did.
It's totally true.
Oh, yeah.
Did you guys know statistically friendly kids have more friends?
Yeah.
That's obvious.
Did you know most people think they're using the right car seat for their kid, but they're not?
Parents who really know it all know for sure that their child is in the right seat. Visit safercar.gov/the right seat to make sure your child is protected.
Hi, and welcome back to Mind Matters. As I promised, we've got toys. I'm here again with Corey Fate with ObjecDesign. And the first question I've got to ask is this really a job?
I happen to think it's the best job.
It looks like you have a lot of fun.
We do. There's a lot of long hours, and there's a lot of not fun moments when you're panicking to get something done and it's not working the way you want. But I'm very much aligned with a passion in life. If I wasn't doing this, I would be doing it in my basement. It's a hobby that somebody would like to pay me for, which is fantastic.
Which is great, right? So your background is industrial design. What kind of a team do you surround yourself with to be successful in a business like this?
Yeah, so our team is made up of other industrial designers. We're fairly evenly matched between industrial designers and mechanical engineers. So the mechanical engineers are primarily responsible for being in the CAD and turning the sketches into an actual 3D CAD model, which then can do all the other processes that we can talk about later, like 3D printing and so on and so forth.
Gotcha.
So you really need, it really needs to get into the computer so that it can be driven downstream.
And all right, so I promised that we would talk more about this. So I've got this in my head.
Right.
Doesn't exist. And then I come to you, or one of your industrial designers. What happens next?
So as we began to touch on early on, would be a certain amount of research that would go on. We have to gather information, which is most important to us. We're information hogs. You can't bog us down with information.
No such thing as too much data.
No too much thing. And then we have to filter all that into what's meaningful, what's not meaningful, what's going to drive this forward. So in the beginning, we also need restrictions. So kind of as I was just stating, as we're gathering information, we need to know what's good information, what's bad information, what's misinformation.
So I come to you with this in my head. One of your jobs is to convince me that what this in my head actually needs to be just a little bit different.
Correct. We have to validate whether or not that's a good idea
Possible or not.
and why. And then there is feasibility. So what would you like out of that? What are your objectives? What do we think the real objective should be? We'll converse about that and decide, okay, these are actually what we're going to strive for, which still may not be possible. We have to vet that. So then you kind of get into proof of concept type of thing. So in this particular example, on that vehicle, there's a whole gear train on the inside that had to be conceived of in order for it to do what it does.
Can I take this apart? Is it possible?
Yeah, you can pop the top off.
Yeah, I'll allow you.
We don't have a screwdriver, so we can't get to the inside of it because it is for a child, so you have to have the
So there's
screwdriver.
guts in there that all have to be thought through.
That's right. So, the concept for this actually was built off of an old concept called Stompers, which was out in the 70s.
Yep.
Wildly successful. And so this was a bring back of that. The advancement that we made, and one of the criticisms of Stompers, was when you put them, when you drove them, they were in gear, and it's locked gears. So once they're locked gears, if you go downhill, those gears can only go as fast as the motor will allow.
It. Gotcha.
So if you went too steep, you would just fall over because the wheels couldn't go fast enough. So we created a gearing system that had a kick-out gear. So when you were going too fast for the motor, it would kick out that gear and allow it to free flow.
That must have taken a significant amount of effort.
It was to come up with the gear ratios, how that would toggle out and then go back into gear and not get hung up.
So it is rocket science.
Yeah, or car science.
Car science.
Gear science. And then we needed an interchangeable chassis. So this is the chassis module, and then we have a whole bunch of tops that all fit the exact same chassis. So that allows the manufacturer to create a whole bunch of different styles.
So this piece that we're looking at right here, is this come off the assembly line or is this 3D printed?
This came off the assembly line. This is a final product.
Okay.
But we have dozens of boneyard of chassis with various things wrong with them that didn't work or worked somewhat well, and they had to be evolved.
Tell me about these glasses. So this one is 3D printed, right?
That one is 3D printed. We have I'm showing two different ways to 3D print. This one's called SLA, or stereolithography, and this one's called FDM. The difference between the two is this one uses ABS and it melts it. Imagine a weed whacker wire. So that's ABS. Imagine heating it up in hot glue gun style. I draw back and forth layer by layer, and then I move it down, and draw again over the top of that, layer by layer. And this one it's fairly obvious to see the layers. It's a little bit more. It's not as fine.
So this is manufactured product.
That's manufactured product.
So I come to you with these once again in my head.
Right.
And then what would be the next step? Something along this line or this line, or?
Obviously, the next step is to draw. We have to get the style right, and so on and so forth. And then on top of that, we have to take measurements of head and find out how we can fit it to the majority of heads.
Where human eyeballs fall.
That's right,
the
interocular distances, so on and so forth, and what the curvature of the glass is, and so you don't get a reflection. This particular product was made for law enforcement, and the key about this was it needed to be close fitting for the face for a couple of purposes. There's 3 different styles that we created. All of them need to be capable of going to the shooting range, and all of them needed to be capable of dealing with crowd control. So you have spitting, you have all sorts of stuff that has to go on. So it has to fit close but comfortable to your face.
Wow, so there's a lot of work there.
Yeah.
How long, for example, would a product like this take from concept to this stage? Is that a year, a month, a week? How much work is actually represented here?
So to go in and out of our doors, and then there's manufacturing time. So manufacturing time sometimes is very incompressible. So that can take up to 15 weeks, and you really can't do much
about that.
It takes that long for the mill to mill through the steel. You can't just zip through it. You have to go at a rate and cool it down. So there's some incompressible times there.
For your creative process, from concept to the point that you're ready to go to manufacture, what does something like this represent? Is that half a year, 6 months?
This probably represents between 4 to 7 months, something like that.
So a lot of work in just a what most people would just offhandedly say, well, that's a pair of glasses.
Right.
Right? It's amazing.
Well, and it all depends. If you're building, so now the next pair of glasses, the next concept, we would have all the head measurements.
Right.
So we would know how to dial in that fit, so we can catapult off of that. So now if we're just concepting on some looks, so it all depends on where you are
In the process.
in the process and what you have under your belt.
Okay, so how does, from a intellectual property ownership perspective, who owns that pair of glasses?
Great question. So we work in two modes. Mode number one, which is dominant, is fee for service. So when it's fee for service, within our contract is you own all IP. We would have to be named on the patent because we are an inventor of it, but you give us the dollar and we give you
the rights to it.
The rights to it. So in another mode, we will Genesis products ourselves, in which case we own it and we can license it off at that point. In that case, we own the patent and we own all rights to it, and we
I want to come
license it
back to
off.
that thought in a second, but let's look at some of these other products here. You've got some very large brand names here. Fisher Price. Actually, this one's cool, and if you don't mind, I'd like to play with it for a little bit later.
Sure.
Fisher Price comes to you with pencil drawings? How does the relationship with somebody as big as Fisher Price work?
So they actually have an inventorship kind of program, a vehicle
think
to get
so.
in. They sometimes will put out information on what they may be looking for. We have a third-party client that came to us that's had a rough concept of where they would like to go, napkin sketchish and a conversation.
Gotcha.
From there, we had to
They
make...
still exist, huh?
Oh, yes. So
Cool.
from there, we ultimately, the final manifestation of this is done by Fisher Price internal. What we did was prove that concept out. So we took the impetus of the idea and had to make some prototypes to prove that mechanically this would work.
It's possible.
Yeah, conceptually this would work. And once we got
Interesting.
that housed into something realistic, then you can present that to Fisher Price and say, okay, put the rest on it.
Gotcha.
Because they whatever the upcoming characters are and so on and so forth. So that one is actually kind of a third mode that we work in, where you're creating the proof of concept. They're actually taking the final steps to get it packaged the way they would like it packaged.
So products that are in your head, do you strike relationships with folks like Fisher Price? We've got a vacuum cleaner here, and we got all kinds of stuff that I want to make sure that we come back around. I don't need to clean the floor right now, I don't believe.
It'll do an outstanding job.
Do you have a series of products already in queue that you're working on to bring to market?
Yes. So we're constantly working on, whenever we have downtime, we have brainstorming sessions on areas of the market we think we could attack, and then we'll try and pair that up into connections that we have. So networking is important to know who to go talk to once we have an idea. How could we outlet it to them? So we're continuing to do that. So we have a number in the pipeline to be created. We have a number that are sitting on a shelf waiting to find the contact that we can present it to. So
Gotcha. And we're in the middle of what I think is some of the most interesting investor strategies that are occurring probably in the last 100 years. Do you work directly with investors who are looking for people and products, and a marriage contract, if you will, trying to glue different things together in order to be successful?
generally not. We will buy the third party. So the third party, either the inventor that has the idea, but they can't get off the ground. So we try and be very open on how things tend to cost. And like anything else, as you start off, drawing with a pencil costs you $1, drawing in CAD costs you $10, making a mold costs you $1,000. So it goes exponentially up. So as we work with an inventor, they may be only be able to foot the very beginning parts of that.
Gotcha.
But then as they want to pitch to an investor, we can aid in getting that pitch, because we'll have the passion and the understanding and be able to answer any
And
questions.
the credibility.
And the credibility.
That this, which is in my head, can actually come to fruition and go to market.
Correct.
Interesting. I've got a lot of toys here, but there are also some industrial products. So let's go back to this vacuum cleaner.
Sure.
Now, I don't know if I want to put it up here or not, but what was your role in something like this?
So that we work for another company called Taconi, and we have been working with them in the past, and so we have made their vacuums doing the industrial design for. We didn't. They have a very very well done inside and a very talented engineering team that brought them, you know, kind of their market space. So we weren't really touching the inner workings of how that, but we did have
How
to
it actually functions.
Yeah,
right.
but we do have to understand it all because our
Your stuff has to work. The outside has to work with the inside.
yes, and
Yeah.
the functionality. So,
Okay.
so part of our job would be what's the intuition of how it's used, where are the buttons located, what do the buttons do,
Gotcha.
what are indicator lights, how you might extract the hose out of there. You
So
know,
the
those type of
user
things.
interface component is a big deal to you as well then.
Absolutely. We have to be inside of you know, various people's minds to come to understand what is the common understanding. I did an entire paper on is the left side of hot and cold, is the left side always hot? And so if anybody walking up to it, if I put it on the left, it's hot.
common interface.
And
You know how to
confirming whether
use it.
that's true or not.
Yeah.
So you have to know these things. It's a whole study called human factors. And there are whole groups that do just human factors and ergonomics. We don't, but we may contract that in if it's outside of you know, our abilities are that mission critical.
And then what about testing? So we now are at this point, maybe you manufacture a couple 100,000 of these. Are you involved in the testing side of it? You'd have to be.
We actually aren't. So one of the escapes that we have are twofold. One, we don't do the patent searches. We don't guarantee that any of our output is patent free. We certainly don't seek to copy anybody. Everything is always original, but we
Right,
can't
but
guarantee
that-
that we haven't come up with the same thing that's
Yeah.
already been come up with.
Human
That's usually
brain being
put-
that creative,
Right.
yeah.
That's usually put on the manufacturers. We're ultimately not manufacturing anything. So all the safety requirements and so on and so forth all come to bear from the actual manufacturer. Now, we ask them for that information, and we try to avoid ahead of time while we're designing any of those issues or build upon what's already been done. So when you start to get into testing, if they have the previous, we know what worked, what didn't work, where's a danger zone or not. Because there's diminishing returns, you can test something to death and you can
Right.
engineer something down to the NASA level.
Right.
We're not there. So we typically over-engineer safety margin so that we're not trying to get down to, yeah, we used only 1.7 grams of stuff and got the perfect structure on
Right.
there. You know, that it usually doesn't require that level.
It's
But there are
a-
methods for, you know, accomplishing that if necessary.
If necessary, right. And you're back to the purpose of the piece. Now, we had mentioned previously that you do a lot of consumer facing, but you also do a lot of B2B, business to business creation.
Correct.
Yeah.
We do printing presses, a variety of those. We also do some sandwich panini type of makers that are out at the Taco Bells and so on and so forth. So those are mission critical for us there because they have such demands. These things
Gotcha.
have to have millions and millions of cycles on them, much more so than a consumer, especially in our unfortunately throwaway society. This won't live for 10 years.
Right.
These machines have to live 50 years.
For a long time.
Yeah, and be serviceable.
Unfortunately, we're starting to run out of time, but in the event that someone is interested in this field and contacting you, just contact you directly.
Yeah, absolutely. Go to our website. You can find all our contact information there. We're completely, open to anybody who wants to call.
Fun. We'll have the website for you, and in the meantime, I got to go find a bathtub because I'm going to go play with these guys. Thanks for joining us on Mind Matters. We'll see you next time.